Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If it's for the first time here, please welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I just want to share two things that shaped me, the person I am today. This page obviously is all about self-empowerment, the things that you can do to empower yourself in order for you to reach your goals. So today I just want to share two things, not many things, two things that actually shaped who I am today. The manner in which the way I think, the way I operate in my life. The first thing that I want to share that I believe shaped the kind of person I am, really shaped me, is reading. So when I was pregnant with Chloe, I was 18 years old and I was at home. I didn't have much to do. There were books that my aunt used to come with from her work, and they were sitting there in the house. And so every time after I clean the house and I'm done with my chores, I would take a book and I would sit there and I would read. These were not novels, these were not biographies, these were sci-fi books, and these were just storytelling books. And I would read those books. I finished all the books that were there. I'm sure there were like close to 30 books. I read them during that time because I didn't have anything. I wasn't doing much. I would just finish my chores and I would just sit there. Take bath and then sit there and then read. The other ones that I did not finish, I read them while I was after I had the baby. In my language in Tswana we say so the few weeks or a few months that after I gave birth and I was still not going anywhere and I was at home, I finished reading those books. So my love for reading really started there. And after I got a job and I came to Pretoria, I also started buying my own books, because that love was there. So when I was not going anywhere or before I sleep or anything like that, I created this life of taking a book and reading. So I really believe that some of the books that I read shaped me. I was shaped by reading. I learned a lot of things through reading. A lot of things that obviously in our day-to-day lives we may not learn, but I learned a lot of things from reading, how people think. I learned different words. I learned how to play around with words from reading the books. So I really learned a lot from books, and I just want to share three books that I read. And these are books that one I didn't buy. One I didn't buy. I took it from a guy that I once dated. So yes, that's one. I'll share with you the two of the books I read. So I'm gonna share three books. And these books I bought, I specifically selected these books because these are books that I read before my life became what it is now, before I got a permanent job, before I even owned a car, before I started even doing a degree. So that's what I'm trying to say reading actually led my path a certain way. The things that I discovered in the books, the things that were shared in the books, they actually taught me a certain way of living, or having a certain characteristics in life. So these are books that I read when I was just starting out life, and I was scared, and no one was actually even advising me in terms of which path to take in life. So really, honestly, the major decisions that I made, or the major decisions that I made, they really came from me reading the books. Even when I felt not confident, when I didn't have confidence in myself, I discovered about confidence and the fact that we are all capable of bigger things from books, actually. So that is why I say books actually, they, shaped who I am today. And the first book that I want to share, this is the one that I got from the guy that I dated. This is The Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. So I read this book, and this book, obviously, Joyce Meyer is a pastor, and she was sharing about how your life is sort of structured when you are young. She actually talks about how the devil clocks in early in your life when you are still a child. Certain things happen in your life, the bad things happen when you are young, and then you grow up having a certain attitude, or you grow up with certain traumas. And we know that the things that happen to you when you are a child, they actually shape the kind of adult that you are when you grow up. So she actually says, the devil clocks in early on in your life, and some of these things, it's things that you have no control over. And then now when you become an adult, you are working to improve yourself from those things. You are working to change your mind. You are working to renew your mind and discover that those things that happen to you, they're actually not who you are. God has got a bigger purpose for your life. And so she's talking about that, and how you actually go about in using the word of God to actually improve your life, and not allow the things that happened early in your life, sometimes even before you were born, to actually determine the kind of life that you live, or the kind of life that you live, or the experiences that you're going to have as an adult. So that was very, very interesting book for me. It is one of the first books that I started reading once I started getting a job. The second book that I read, believe it or not, it was written by it's a Donald Trump book. Somebody else wrote it. He says, think big. So they say this book is Donald Trump's version of The Secret. It's a must call. It's a must read. So he talks about how you should dream big. He talks about how you should be you should be so brave in going after your dreams. He talks about the things that he's done. He talks about the buildings that he's built. He talks about the golf courses that he's built. He even starts telling us where it started, and certain experiences in life, the things that he doesn't agree with, and the things that he agrees with. And this book, guys, I bought it and read it before we even knew that Donald Trump was ever going to be the president of the United States of America. But this tells you actually that this man really does dream big, because here he says, don't play small. He says, think big, dream big. He says, don't play small here on earth, because you are capable of so much. And yes, this is a man who actually went to become the United States of America president. I mean, how many people actually get that opportunity? So yes, that's one of the books that I read. I remember reading it. It was one of the books that I was reading one day when I was on a trip. I was still at Tempe at the time, and I remember we were going to the Eastern Cape with work, and I was reading it on the flight to go and to come back. So yeah, that's one of the books that actually shaped me, my thoughts, and the way I think. The other book that I read, The Principles and Benefits of Change by Dr. Myles Munroe. This book, if I remember well, I read it in 2009. I bought it and read it in 2009. At the same time as I was reading this book, actually after I read this book, I read the Who Moved My Cheese book. They speak about the same thing. They speak about change. They speak about initiating change, not being afraid of change. They speak about not waiting for things to go bad before you can actually initiate change. You can change direction. It's a really good book. It's one of the books that actually taught me somehow that when I'm going through a certain journey in my life, I sort of kind of get attracted to a certain book. This book, I read it when my journey with the IDT was coming to an end, and there was a month where I was unemployed and I had to decide whether I stay in Pretoria or I go back home. And I decided that, you know what, I'm going to stay in Pretoria until I find a job. I didn't even know, the audacity. I didn't even know where I was gonna get money for rent, for food, and all of that. But you know what? I only stayed at home. I only stayed in that place that I was at for only a month. I remember the contract finished in 2010 February, at the end of February, and I stayed unemployed for 1 month, which was March 2010. Not the first, because the first, I think it was in a weekend. I think the 3rd or the 4th of April, I was employed elsewhere. That's when I started my journey as a temp. So this is the book that actually taught me that change is normal. Change happens all the time, but it works better when you actually initiate the change, instead of you being kicked down by change, instead of you being pulled all sort of directions because there's a change that is happening. He says, Dr. Miles Monroe, he says, it's good to initiate change. You can change direction and you be the one who is on the driving seat to actually direct your life the way you want it to, because change is inevitable. Change will happen whether you like it or not. So yeah, that's reading, right? And I shared those 3 books that I read that actually shaped my thinking, the way I think, the way I live, in the world. Yes, fear still gets there, but fear, I always say, fear should not stop us. Yes, so that was reading that actually shaped who I am and the kind of person that I am today and the way I do things. The second thing is my relationship with my father, my relationship with my dad. Well, I was a very problematic teenager. Really, I always say, kids are naughty. I know I was a very naughty teenager. I used to just do my own things, but I had a relationship with my dad from when I was a teenager. I suppose it's because we used to sit there and I would sit there, watch soccer with him, watch TV with him, the news and all of that. And that's how I learned Zulu. I learned Zulu just by watching the news, the Zulu news. Nobody taught me Zulu, what it means, what is being said on TV. I just learned by myself. So the relationship that I had with my dad was one where he would never say, don't talk to me like that. And I suppose the manner in which he spoke to me taught me that this is how you speak to the next person. He was a very free and open person, and there was no topic that was off limits with my father. That's why we talked about politics, we talked about business, we talked about economics, we talked about family issues, we talked about everything, okay, except relationships. I never really shared those kind of things with him, but we talked about everything. And you know what that taught me? That taught me to open my mouth. That taught me to be able to go to places and speak. That taught me not to look at who is this, what that title is. If I have an opinion that I want to raise, I will open my mouth and speak, and I do so respectfully. And that's another thing that my dad taught me. He taught me respect. I remember I was going to a funeral and I didn't have anything on my head. Oh my God. I didn't realize, I was just took a bath and I was like on my way. And he was like, hey, where are you going? Whose child are you going to say to people you are going to a funeral without wearing something on your head? And in my village where I come from, we still have some things like that. Okay, now it's a bit relaxed, but those days, it was so strict that you were not allowed to go into the graveyard not wearing anything on your head. And my dad taught me, those were one of the those things that I remember, that he taught me to be respectful, to respect other people, and just to be a respectful person. So he really taught me a lot. I mean, he taught me to be outspoken, to speak for myself, to stand up for myself, not to be afraid to open my mouth and voice my opinion. That's my dad. That's what he taught me. And I believe, because today, my goodness, if there's anything, I mean, 80% of the time, if there is something that I want to say anywhere, in a meeting, anywhere, I will open my mouth and respectfully speak my mind and make my voice heard. That's what my dad taught me, because that's what he allowed me to be with him. And I think that's a very important thing that I think parents need to do. Parents need to actually, allow their kids to voice their opinions and guide them. When your kids open their mouth, you get to know what they're experiencing out there. You get to know what they're thinking, what is influencing their lives, and then you can shape that, you can direct their life. Because you can't say don't say. You can't say don't say. What you're doing by that is you are suppressing them. You are saying you cannot voice your opinion. You are saying you have no right to speak. And actually, they are human beings. They do have a right to speak. So we need to channel them. Even if, the way they speak, you channel them to say, I don't know how you will do it, but you channel them the way you want to channel them, but you cannot suppress them. Whatever you do, you cannot suppress them, because they will be afraid to stand up for themselves. They will be afraid to voice their opinions, even when it matters, because these are kids that are going to grow up to be parents. They're going to grow up to be employees, business people. They're going to have to go and face people and actually present their business ideas. How are they going to do that if, when as a parent, you've been suppressing them since they've been young? You're telling them, don't talk, shut up, you can't talk, don't. We need to be careful about how we treat our kids, especially with them opening their mouth and speak. I've realized that, because now it has shaped me, my relationship with my dad, because he allowed me to speak. There was nothing out of limits. My dad was a very open human being, was a very open father, who allowed you to speak your mind. You don't disrespect, but you speak your mind when you have an opinion. And I think that's one other thing that really has shaped the kind of person that I am. So thank you so much for staying with me in this video, as I'm sharing these two things that really, I feel, they have really shaped the kind of person that I am. They have shaped me. That's books, and that was my relationship with my dad. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share and like. Please, I would like to hear what you think about this topic that I talked about